it's good now. It all matters when that's fun.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this wonderful program. I know that you're going to enjoy this. It's probably something that a lot of people have on their bucket list that they might do, and we're very envious that Susana was able to do it. As you know, the title of the program today is To Compostela and Beyond, a poet's chronicle of the Camino de Santiago. So it's detailing author Susana Porras' 500-mile journey on the Camino de Santiago. So I want to welcome you all. I want to make sure for optimal viewing that you please mute yourself. We are going to be recording the program today. It will be on Pasadena Public Library YouTube. So YouTube, Pasadena Library, if you would like to see the program following this event, or if you want to see it another day or share it with friends, you can do so. Also, chat will be private with me. If you put your questions in chat following Susana's presentation, I will ask the questions. It's a live transcript. You can see all of the wording on the bottom. You need to connect that yourself so that you're able to read it if you want to. I want to remind you that I know you came in today and you signed up for all of our programs on the Pasadena Public Library website, and I hope that you'll notice the rest of the programs that we have. Tomorrow we have a program by Ron White. He is a foremost authority on Abraham Lincoln, and he has written several books on Abraham Lincoln, and he is presenting a program, obviously, on Abraham Lincoln. Today's program is part of our Summer Reading Club program that features the book Leave Only Footprints by Connor Knighton. Leave Only Footprints, My Acadia to Zion Journey Through Every National Park. So you can get a copy of the book at the Pasadena Library. So welcome to Susana. This is her beautiful, beautiful book that we have in the Pasadena Public Library that you are able to check out, To Compostela and Beyond, a poet's chronicle of the Camino de Santiago. It is detailing, as I said, her 500-mile journey. If you can imagine walking 500 miles. It is a collection of 39 sonnets that she composed on 39 days and nights as she made this historic pilgrimage known on the Camino de Santiago. The complete trip obviously can be very arduous with different terrains and weather across the landscape. And for Porras, the poems became respite and solace from a day's walk. The walk, known in English as the Way of St. James, is a network of pilgrim ways. She walked this walk with her father, 73-year-old father, and it was a wonderful father and daughter event. The pilgrimage leads to the shrine of the Apostle St. James the Great in the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela and Glacia. It's the north of Portugal. Porras, who has traveled extensively throughout Europe and Central America, took this trip, as I said, with her then 73-year-old father in 2018 and considers it a highlight of her life. So we're going to join Susana today to hear about this amazing journey and the poetry it inspired her to write. So welcome, Susana. Thank you so much for attending and presenting your program for us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And again, it's been such a journey just to get here. And I really appreciate all your support, Christina. You and the library staff have been absolutely wonderful. I really appreciate you. Again, my name is Susana Porras, and I'm the author of To Compostela and Beyond, a poet's chronicle of the Camino de Santiago. Like many of you here this evening, I have made travel a big part of my life over the years, and I've used it as a way to enhance my education and to sharpen my language skills. But more importantly, it's been a way for me to connect with people and to make new friends. And this kind of stems from my early years as a pen pal. I began pen paling at the age of 10 years old. Some of my early pen pals were from Egypt and France and New York. And I really enjoyed that correspondence between me and the rest of the world. And travel has given me that opportunity to continue growing my international family, as well as really feeling like I'm part of this global community. I think Woodrow Wilson said it best. He said that friendship is the only cement that keeps the world together. And I'm going to take it one step further today, and I'm going to say that friendship is the only cement that keeps the Camino de Santiago together. So today I'm going to tell you about this trip to Santiago de Compostela, or this journey to Santiago de Compostela with my father, and also my journey to becoming a published author, both of which were completely unintended. I've been asking my father for about 13 years to travel to Europe with me. And finally, in 2017, he agreed to go. And so I wasn't sure if I was ever going to be able to convince him to go again with me to Europe, that I packed everything I possibly could into this itinerary. And we saw Stonehenge, we saw the Mona Lisa, and we saw everything in between. And during this time, we crisscrossed some areas that came near the Camino de Santiago. So I proceeded to tell my father about this fabled pilgrimage across northern Spain. And up until this moment, my father had really enjoyed Europe with a lot of enthusiasm, but he seemed a little bit irritated when I told him about the Camino. And he says to me, you know, at my age, I really don't need to be talking about 500-mile pilgrimages. So I dropped the subject, and we had a wonderful rest of our trip in Europe, and we came home. And a few days after we arrived home, I'm back at my parents' house visiting, and we're sitting there watching television. And my father looks over at me and he says, hey, you remember that Camino you were talking about? And I very reluctantly looked over, and he said, and I said, yeah, I remember. And he said, well, I want to go next summer. And I can't tell you how many things went through my mind in a split second, including the fact that I knew that we needed 1 year to prepare for something like this. So I very hastily counted with one hand how many months we had, and we had 9 months. And still with a lot of doubt in my head, I looked over at my dad and I said, you know, you do realize if we go on Camino next year, we would have to start preparing for it right now. And my father very casually says, yeah, that's fine. So needless to say, I spent the next 9 months eating, sleeping, and dreaming the Camino de Santiago, including planning how I was going to document this trip. I didn't know if I was going to take pictures, video, draw, write. And finally, I concluded that writing was probably my best option. So I created a blog, and I dove into the world of Camino blogs. And I quickly figured out that most of the Camino blogs look the same. And I'm not saying that your experiences as a pilgrim are going to be the same, but you have to remember this pilgrimage is thousands of years old, I mean, hundreds of years old, and many of the sites haven't changed much. So anybody writing about the Camino is basically writing about the same things that people were talking about a few hundred years ago. And so the challenge was to write about the same thing people have been writing for many years, but to make it look totally different. And finally, a couple of weeks before we left on Camino, it dawned on me to use poetry. And I immediately became enthusiastic about it because I thought about that fun, lyrical, colorful poetry from when I was a kid. And I thought I could do this for my friends. My friends will like that. And so I spent the next couple of weeks trying to figure out how I was going to do that. And I found the Shakespearean sonnet. And the Shakespearean sonnet is very formulaic. It's short, it's sweet, and best of all, it rhymed. And I thought, this is the structure that I'm going to use. Traditionally, the Shakespearean sonnet is a love poem, but I figured, hey, I'm writing for my friends and family back home, why not? And so on May 31st, 2018, my father and I leave on Camino. We go from LA to Paris and take a connecting flight to Biarritz. And from there, we had to take a taxi to Saint Jean Pied de Port because there were no trains because there was another train strike in France. So I think Christine did a wonderful job of explaining what the Camino is. We did decide to take the most traditional route, which was the French way from Saint Jean Pied de Port all the way to Santiago de Compostela. Again, it's 500 miles. And to put that in perspective, I'm actually going to share my screen right now so you can see this. At least I'm trying to. Let's see. I think I'm going to need some help with this. And to put it in perspective, these 500 miles for an average pilgrim, it takes about an average of 30 to 34 days to complete. And you're walking about 14 to 16 miles a day. And you got it? Okay, perfect. Okay, great. And for those of you who live in Pasadena, can everybody see my screen share? So hopefully, yes, okay. For those of you who live in Pasadena, that's 161 times around the Pasadena Rose Bowl loop. Yeah. Okay, so why walk the Camino? I think most people walk the Camino for the basic reasons: for spiritual awakening, for fitness, for bonding with family and friends. But I think if you're going to do the Camino yourself, you really have to find an additional purpose for your Camino. It's very rare, especially for us Americans, to take 5 weeks to take off to go do something. And so the Camino offers so many opportunities to sharpen any skills that you might have an interest in, whether it be photography, art, music, languages, whatever it be. It's a really good opportunity for you to use that time to expand on any other skills that you would like to focus on. I think I'm having a little trouble with the.
Just use the scroll pad to scroll if you're in the document. Now you go.
Oh, I see. Okay, Perry. Okay, great. So do I have to do anything else?
Just your fingers. Just scroll it like this. Do two
Oh, 2 fingers. Got it. Okay, great. Okay, so some basic Camino symbols. The first and most popular is the scallop shell, and that represents Saint James the Great. Saint James the Great was one of the apostles of Jesus that was martyred in Jerusalem. And when his followers brought him back to Spain, his body was lost at sea. And when he washed up on the shores of Galicia, his body was covered in scallop shells. And so pilgrims today carry their scallop shell on their backpack as a symbol of being a pilgrim all the way till the end. A second popular symbol is the gourd. And this is where traditional pilgrims once carried their water or their wine. Today, traditional pilgrims just have it on their backpack as a decorative item. And finally, the third symbol, which is probably the one that will mean the most to you, is your burden stone. And this is a small rock that you bring from your home. And this represents something that you want to leave behind and something that you want to possibly forgive or be forgiven for. And you carry it all the way to one of the most symbolic locations on the Camino, which is the Crucifero. And that's where you leave your stone. Let's see. Can I do this again? I'm getting this correct, people. Almost there. Whoopsie daisy. Maybe not. Okay, and once you arrive in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, one thing that you must do is you need to register as a pilgrim in the pilgrim office and pick up a passport document that looks like an accordion. And you have to have it stamped twice a day, every single day on the Camino. And it looks like this. And so this is my passport, and it's stamped on both sides. It's kind of a neat thing to have. And then you present it at the pilgrim office once you reach Santiago, and present it so that you can be issued a Compostela, which is your certificate of recognition that you completed this walk. It's a beautiful, I forgot to bring it, but it's a beautiful certificate with your name written on it. It's a really nice souvenir for you to take home. I kind of fell into that trap of thinking about the Camino as just a walk. All of us walk every day. And when you think about it, you think, oh, you know, if I'm just going to go on the Camino, it's not going to be a big deal. I can just walk a little bit every day and I'll make it. Well, it's a very arduous journey, and it does require a lot of training, and you have to have the correct gear for it. I spent 9 months planning and packing for this Camino, and I think I had it almost about 100% right. There were maybe a couple of items that I wish I wouldn't have taken, and a couple of items that I wish I would have, but for the most part, I really worked on taking the correct gear and good quality gear on the Camino. Do not overload your backpack. It's very easy to do that. When I got all of the items for my dad's backpack and my backpack, I made sure that we mirrored each other. So I didn't quite understand when we arrived in the airport why his backpack was like 5 or 6 pounds heavier than mine. And I didn't realize what happened until we arrived in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. My dad had packed an extra pair of jeans, an extra pair of shoes, a bottle of shampoo. And I said, Dad, you can't take these things on the Camino. And luckily he understood and he left everything behind. And the third thing, which is probably your most important, is a pair of shoes. You really need to research your shoes because everybody's different. You have to make sure that you have the right pair of shoes that's for you, and you have to try it out in many different terrains, and you have to break them in before you take them on the Camino. This gentleman that you see here is Ray. He was one of our first Camino friends, and we're really excited to be walking with him. He's an American expat who was living in Mexico at the time, and he decided to one day just get up and start walking the Camino. He threw a bunch of items in his backpack and he left. And this is Ray and my dad ready to cross a bridge to up into the Pyrenees Mountains. What you don't see here is that as soon as you walk out of this bridge, you're walking on a straight incline all the way up the Pyrenees Mountains. Oh, it came up a little too high.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no, you're good. It looks like that. And so Ray began walking with us, and about 10 minutes into the walk, he couldn't do it anymore. He was carrying 25 pounds in his backpack. That was probably about 7 or 8 pounds more than what my dad was carrying at the time. And so he had to turn around and go back and figure out another way around the Pyrenees Mountains. There is another way to get there. There's a lot of interesting people that you meet on the Camino. And this gentleman right here is my absolute favorite. He was a Capuchin monk from Brazil. And as you can see, he's walking the Camino in full garb. I'm not sure if you can see at the bottom of your screen, but that's his backpack. And he has a statue of the Virgin Mary, a strap to it. He brought this all the way from Brazil. He was going to carry it all the way through the Camino de Santiago, have it blessed in Santiago de Compostela, and bring it back home to his monastery. He was quite a character. Everybody on the Camino absolutely loved him, and we had a wonderful time walking with him. When you're walking over the Pyrenees Mountains, there are these beautiful, beautiful scenes that you almost feel like Julie Andrews is going to come twirling around there and singing "The Hills Are Alive" with the sound of music. It's so peaceful and so beautiful that you don't realize until you reach the first city that you're going to reach on the Camino, how jarring the Camino can be when you go from a very quiet place into a city. Now there's 4 cities that you're going to hit on the Camino de Santiago, and I'm going to talk about these 4 cities because generally people don't talk about the cities on the Camino, and these should be 4 main stages on the Camino that you should be aware of. So the first is Pamplona, the second is Logroño, the third is Burgos, and the fourth is León. I was very excited to arrive in Pamplona. I had just finished reading The Paris Wife by Paula McLean, and the story was written from the point of view of Hadley Richardson, who was Ernest Hemingway's first wife. And in the book, they talk a lot about all of the adventures they have in Paris and of course Pamplona. So I was very excited to be channeling Ernest Hemingway. Just like he wrote "The Sun Also Rises," I was there with some really awesome people in the cafes in Pamplona and writing about my own adventures there. So I was very excited. You have to be hyper aware of all of the fiestas. Obviously, the one that's the most famous is the Fiesta of San Fermin, which is the running of the bulls. If you are not aware of these fiestas, you may run into some trouble if you haven't made some reservations ahead of time. And part of the problem is that if you do find a reservation, they can be very expensive. The hotel rooms, I looked at them for the Festival of San Fermin, were running between $4,000 and $5,000 per night. So you have to be really aware of these incidentals, okay? And one thing that I wasn't too aware of on the Camino, and that really surprised me, was the amount of vegetation on the Camino. And so, oh my goodness, you're kidding.
So is it?
Goodness.
Let's just figure it out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Okay, so the one thing that I wasn't, that's fine.
Okay.
One thing that I wasn't too aware of on the Camino was the amount of vegetation. Most of the pictures and video and movies that I had seen of the Camino really showed a very dry and desolate place. And luckily we arrived during a very particularly rainy season, where many of the regions had flooded. And it caused this explosion of flowers all over the Camino. Everywhere we met, we found bouquets of flowers. We were greeted with bouquets of flowers everywhere in the Camino. I hope I can get this thing back up. So in the meantime, I'll keep talking. Like we said, the Camino is about 1,000 years old. And but you're going to find things on the Camino that are much older. And one of the things that I really was fascinated with were the Roman roads. There's a whole section of Roman roads that is over 2,000 years old, where Camino pilgrims still use them today to walk to their destinations. The second city that you're going to arrive in is the city of Logroño. And I was not aware of the parties in Logroño, and fortunately I had made a reservation at one of the pensions, but we arrived so late that when we got to the pension, they told us that that's okay. Yeah, it's okay.
You're still in town.
Yeah, it's okay. So they told us that they had relisted our room, but we arrived just in time for them to arrived just in time for them to salvage the room. Anyway, the patron saints festivities of the city of Logroño, they are celebrated around June 11, together with La Rioja Day, which is celebrated on June 9th. For those of you who are serious about walking on the Camino, I recommend the American Pilgrims on the Camino. I don't know if anybody can see these, but there we go. So these are the American Pilgrims on the Camino. There we go, right there. Maybe right there. Okay. So the American Pilgrims in the Camino, these fine ladies right here are from the Northern California chapter. They were absolutely so much fun to walk with. There's a small membership fee. I think that's like $75 or something like that, but they have a lot of activities and a lot of walks that are designed to help you train for this Camino. And we really enjoyed walking with them. Again, it is the American Pilgrims on the Camino.org. I'm going to show you right now my favorite picture on the Camino. This is my father walking from one endless road to get to another endless road. And if you can see the stark contrast between the dark, ominous clouds and the beautiful green wheat fields, this is something that was very typical on the Camino. There was no day on the Camino that we didn't see some very amazing sights. It's really a spectacular place to walk. This is Spain's version of Stonehenge. And like I said, there are many ancient sites along the Camino de Santiago. This is being the oldest. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site on account of their sources being the earliest human remains ever discovered in Europe. The latest analysis points to human activity that goes back 1.2 million years. It is an area that not only has these rocks, but it also has a museum and an active archaeological dig. So if this is something that you enjoy, it's a good idea for you to attend. The third city is the city of Burgos, and it has this beautiful French Gothic cathedral. Like I said, you know, the cities can be kind of a negative, but they can also be a big positive. If you have any equipment that you need to purchase, or you need to see a doctor, or you need to get some medical supplies, or you need to go to an emergency room, Burgos is probably the biggest city on the Camino, and you can definitely use it to do that. And thank you. And I ended up in the emergency room myself, actually. And so a couple of days before we arrived in Burgos, we were in Belorado, where we were hit by this horrible windstorm, and my eyes became terribly irritated. I wasn't sure if I had an infection or if I had a really horrible allergic reaction, but in fact, the doctors in the emergency room told me that it was just an allergic reaction. They gave me some eye drops, and it took care of itself in 2 or 3 days. This is the reason why you go on the Camino. You go on the Camino to make friends. One of the things that is very difficult to do is keeping up with each other's pace. I, for one, had a difficult time keeping up with my dad. My dad walks very fast compared to me, but because he was my dad, he actually waited. But for the most part, it's very difficult to keep the friends on your Camino. So in the book, I'm going to talk a lot about how you constantly lose friends. So sometimes you might lose friends because they're only doing part of the Camino, but often you lose your friends because you're just not walking at the same pace. But we were very lucky to have these two wonderful people walk with us. This is Father Ali from the Philippines and Carla from New York. They walked with us about 3/4 of the way, which was absolutely incredible. We shared meals with them. We had discussions. We had an absolutely wonderful time. So if you're lucky enough to find some people like that to share your time with on the Camino, it's definitely well worth it. I purposely did not talk about food too much on the Camino because you need an entire webinar to talk about food on the Camino. The variety and the quantity of food that you see on the Camino is mind-boggling. And my dad even made a comment. He said, I don't think I've ever seen you eat so much before. And I told my dad, you know, because we're going through all of these different regions. I said, if you don't eat it now, you're probably not going to eat it in the next town. So we had all of these cheeses and wines and different dishes to try. So I know the paella is delicious. You can find paella all over the Camino, but there are plenty of other dishes that are specifically regional that you should definitely enjoy. If you're feeling like you're someone who doesn't particularly have maybe the physical ability to do the Camino, my father, again, was 73 years old. He's the one in the brown, and he was and is a very fit senior. And he did the Camino with no problem at all whatsoever. But we found all of these amazing people on the Camino. There wasn't a day that we weren't humbled by the people that we met. But this gentleman right here in the orange is my biggest hero on the Camino, hands down. He is completely blind, and he is doing the Camino for the 3rd time. And although I had a very difficult time on the Camino, I had endless blisters and my allergies that sent me to the emergency room. I was compensated with the fact that every single day I had these beautiful sights of the mountain ranges, the cute little towns, the food, the beautiful vegetation. Everything was just so gorgeous. And so I always reminded myself that it was worth it. This gentleman, I'm sure that he enjoyed the Camino just as much as I do, but he was just one of the most wonderful people that we met there. And the 4th and final city that you're going to visit is the city of León. Hands down, most beautiful city on the Camino. I purposely spent 3 days of the Camino there with my dad, thinking that I was going to rest. That was probably the biggest mistake that I did on the Camino. These people know how to party. They had fireworks, musical performances, fashion shows, art competitions, parades of giants, food, formal presentations by local dignitaries. We probably ended up walking an additional 20 to 30 miles in those 3 days just from walking around and doing everything that there was to do. So if you're going to take some time to do the fiesta, make sure that you add in some additional time to get some rest on the Camino. This is one of the most beautiful structures on the Camino. You're going to see cathedral after cathedral, but this one is very important to stop at and gawk, because it has 1,764 square meters of window surfaces, and most of them are original from the medieval period, which makes it one of the largest collections in all of Europe. You cannot see the rose window in the front because it was being restored at the time, but you could see it from the inside. So definitely this is a place that you need to stop by on the Camino de Santiago. We started the Camino kind of in late spring, and so we didn't really have to get up too early to start our Caminos. We were starting maybe at around 7:30 and 8 o'clock in the morning, and we were able to make all of our stops that we wanted to make. But as I heard the pilgrims talking on the Camino, some of the people that started in like late July and August, when it gets really, really hot, some of these pilgrims start their Camino at 4 o'clock in the morning, which is very cool to walk at that time. But the problem is that you're going to miss a lot of the areas that you want to visit because everything's going to be closed. So you might want to figure out and better plan your Camino if you're going to go during the hot months. But we were compensated by these beautiful sights in the morning when we did see the sunrise. One thing that I did miss on the Camino, because it was covered under one line in my guidebook, was the Bishop's Palace in Astorga. It was designed by Antoni Gaudí. And many of you probably know Gaudí from La Iglesia de la Sagrada Familia, which is Sacred Heart Church in Barcelona, Spain. And this consists of a castle, a church, and a mansion. It has an impressive granite white exterior. It's absolutely beautiful. This is probably one of my biggest regrets on the Camino that I didn't get a chance to go in and see it. So make sure you plan your Camino adequately so that you don't miss anything on your Camino. This wonderful lady right here, the people that you meet on the Camino are something else. This woman here did the Camino with her husband. Her husband was not interested in walking, so they took a camper with them to the Camino, and he would drive ahead, prepare meals, and when he wasn't cooking, he was reading and she was walking. So she walked the entire Camino and he read the entire Camino, and they spent a wonderful time together every time they shared a meal and spent evenings out. So if you have a partner that doesn't particularly like to walk, this is a perfect solution for you.
And doesn't Susana look so cute? Yes, she does.
And this is the Crucifero. This is definitely a highlight. This was a highlight of our trip. Now, this is the place where you leave your burden stone. Now, it was a little confusing because there are crosses up and down the Camino, and you're not really sure which one is the Crucifero. So there were about a dozen of us walking to the Crucifero that day. And when we arrived, it was a little confusing. Everybody was kind of quiet. Nobody wanted to say anything because they didn't really know if this was a place to leave their burden stone. And one of the people that we were walking with, Chris, he kind of blurted out and he said something like, "Oh, I think I left my left my stone on the wrong cross." And there was just this big explosion of laughter, and everybody started crying and everybody started hugging one another. We were so delighted to we were so delighted to finally have arrived at the highest point of the Camino. This is at 4,921 feet above sea level. You're going to see these beautiful little idyllic towns up and down the Camino. These should be designated for your rest days. It's recommended that you allot at least 2 or 3 rest days along the Camino. This is Molina Seca. I thought it was so pretty when we got there, even though it had rained. We got there and there were people swimming in the river when they had their little boats and kayaks. It was just a darling little town. It's a beautiful place to sit down and rest. And it's only maybe a couple of miles from Ponferrada, which has the big castle of the Knights Templars to visit. So I recommend this one for a day's rest. And I took a million pictures of the livestock on the Camino because they were just so beautiful. These are happy California cows on the Camino. And this is the reason why your Manchego cheese is so expensive these days. So you are going to be in primarily rural areas on the Camino. It's very beautiful, and I couldn't have taken enough pictures of the livestock along the way. And finally, after much pain, discomfort, a few dozen blisters and allergies and sunburns, we arrive in this cathedral, this basilica. And I have to confess that I didn't necessarily sit there and listen to the mass. I was busy surveying the entire congregation to see if I could find any of my Camino friends. I was so looking forward to finally reaching the Camino and hugging everybody, and I couldn't see anybody on the Camino. I was so disappointed. And then next thing I know, when the mass is over, I lost my dad. And I thought, I haven't lost my dad in 500 miles, and I lose him here at the cathedral. And so I'm going around in circles in the cathedral looking for my dad. And finally, I hear him calling out my name. And there he was with Father Ali. And I couldn't believe it. We all broke down, we hugged, and we cried some more. It was just a really nice thing to see one of our friends, and one of our friends we had suffered so much with along the Camino. It was just a wonderful, heartwarming experience. And this is me, and I will share with you later how you can reach me. And like I said, this is a kind of a book of poems, of love poems for all of my friends. I can actually go through the entire book because when I left on the Camino, I realized how many of my friends had the Camino de Santiago on their bucket list. And I kind of felt a responsibility to them to finish this Camino. And so when I was writing these poems, I made it a point to write whatever I could find in the Camino that I thought that they would like. So I can actually go through all the poems and write all of my friends' names on them. For my friends who liked jazz or liked flowers or liked Hollywood, I wrote a little bit about those things for my friends back home. And I wrote a lot about my friends on the Camino. So this is a book of love poems to all of my friends that I left on the Camino and all of my friends that I have here at home. So thank you so much. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Susana. What a fascinating journey. And your photos were absolutely beautiful. You talked about the friends that you made and the beautiful scenery and the food. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Absolutely.
So I'm sure a lot of people have questions. So while you write the questions, I will show you that I don't know whether you can see this, but this is a pin. You might talk about this pin that you actually gave me, Susana.
Absolutely.
Shell,
You
and
exactly. So when we finish the Camino, right there in the area where you receive your Compostela, your certificate of completion, there's a tiny gift shop. And I was able to pick up a handful of these little scallop shells with the cross, the symbol of the cross of the Camino. And Christina's been such a support to me, and I absolutely love her for that. And she told me how much she wanted to go on the Camino. So I wanted to share that with her. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Oh, thank you very much. So someone wants to know how they can see your wonderful program again. So you go to YouTube, Pasadena Library. Now, it won't be uploaded until tomorrow because it takes a while to get it put on YouTube. But you can go to YouTube, Pasadena Library, and see it again. So would you walk the Camino again? Or is it something that you just do once?
You know what? I've thought about that quite a bit. And it was such a special experience because I did it with my dad. And when I left the Camino, I was in so much pain. I was like in a lot of pain for about a month after I came back. I had these ghost pains in my feet and they were swollen for a very long time. And I swore that I would never do it again. And I couldn't understand all these people that would repetitively do the Camino. But as time goes on, I thought I might want to do one of the other routes, but the French way was so special to me and my dad that I don't think I would do that one again. I would probably do one of the other routes.
How many other routes are there?
I think there's 6 or 7. There's like the one that's called Silver, the English way. There's the Portuguese way, the English way. So there's about 7 more routes, but they all converge into the same area. So, and you start in different places. Some of these pilgrims walked from home and they walk all the way to Santiago to Compostela and then they walk back. So for us, we think of Santiago as walking from St. John to Galicia, but some of these people are coming from like Portugal. I mean, they're coming from these areas. Oh, here we go. Thank you so much. There's the Camino Francés, Camino Portugués, Camino Portugués Postal, El Camino del Norte, Camino Primitivo, La Vía de Plata, Le Puy Camino, Camino Finisterra, and El Camino Inglés. So there's many to choose from.
Oh, and how did you select yours?
Mine was the most traditional one. So mine was the original. I'm a little conservative when it comes to that kind of stuff.
So how much actually did it cost? I mean, is it free to go on? You had to pay for your hotels. So you stayed at pensions.
Absolutely. You can stay in albergues, and albergues typically cost about 5 to 15 euros a night, which is very reasonable, and they come with breakfast. But because I was traveling with my father and he was 73 years old at the time, I was very concerned about his health and I wanted to make sure he was okay. So I purposely reserved pensions and hotels all along the Camino. They were very reasonably priced. I believe we probably stayed at a total of 40 along the way, and we split the cost. It was about $2,500 for the hotels for each of us. And all of the hotels, I made sure that breakfast was included.
Wow. And then you think that's for the 39 days that you were gone.
Yes,
That's not really,
Yes.
really that much.
it was a
So-
very fair price.
So do you have another big trip planned?
I did. I want. We've been planning this trip with my dad for about 8 years, but it depends how COVID's going to go. We wanted to go see the World Cup in Qatar in 2022. So we've been thinking about this for 8 years. So it's going to happen. So we want to go see our favorite teams. And coincidentally, the World Cup was occurring during our Camino. And so every night we were rushing to get back so that we could watch the game. So we watched the entire World Cup on the Camino.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So someone wants to know how they can actually purchase a copy of your book. I know we have it in the Pasadena Library. So where can they get a copy of the book?
It's available on Amazon.
Perfect.
Amazon, and it was, I believe you can still probably get it at Romans and also at the publisher, Whippenstock Publishers, but Amazon is probably the easiest one. But, please support your local bookstore, Romans. That would be fabulous.
Great. Thank you so much. So how did you prep yourself? I mean, you talked about getting correct shoes, but then you must have, and you went and tried them on all sorts of different terrain. So what terrain did you go around here?
That was probably my biggest mistake. I didn't cover a lot of terrains. I did a little bit of hiking in the Malibu Mountains, but most of my training happened around the Rose Bowl Loop. And I did walk one time all the way to the Eagle Rock Library to go return a book. And that was probably my longest walk. I think it was something like, 9 miles or something like that. So that was my longest walk. But by far, I think that was my biggest mistake on the Camino. I did not train enough. And we only had 9 months. And during those 9 months, I had to read all the guidebooks. I had to make all the reservations. I had to make sure I had all of the right equipment. I still had a job to take care of. So walking was probably one of my least priorities. But I definitely encourage you, if you're going to do the Camino, to do as much walking as possible over many different kinds of terrain.
Okay, so people want to know, did you encounter a lot of Basque speakers in Pamplona along the
Oh,
Camino?
absolutely. We can, yes, definitely. Yeah, it's Basque country in St. Jean-Pied-de-Port as well. That's the French side, and all the way to Pamplona. So everything is in Basque. All the signage is in Basque. People are talking in Basque, and it's a very hot topic, obviously, because there's a lot of political kind of issues there, and still people are on different sides of the spectrum. So in the tables that we were sitting down to eat, people were talking about this division. People still want to be purely Basque, and they want to separate themselves from Spain, or they want to separate themselves from France, and they want to be purely Basque. So yes, definitely, there's a very strong Basque influence in the area.
Thank you. So I know if you can go to just outside of Fresno on the way to one of the routes to Yosemite, you encounter a lot of Basque residents, and you can go to their wonderful restaurants and have a Basque meal. So I'm just sure that you had some fabulous meals there. What was actually your favorite?
The most surprising, for any of you who have traveled to France, the portion sizes are like this big, right? And
Right.
So they're tiny. And so when we were in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, ready to do our Camino, we ordered the beef that they had there. And it was a smorgasbord. It was just an infinite amount of meat. It was absolutely delicious, but it was enough meat to probably feed about 6 people. I couldn't believe the quantities. It was absolutely delicious, though. I wish I had a picture of it with me right now to show you, but that was probably my favorite Basque meal. I wish I could have finished it.
Oh, or take some along with you.
Or take it with me, freeze it. Yeah.
So you made a lot of friends along the way. Did you keep in touch with any of them? You talked about pen pals when you first started the program today.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, definitely. I do everything possible to keep in touch with everybody that I meet. Carla is the one that you saw in the picture with Father Ali. She's one of my closest Camino friends, and we definitely talk all the time. But I have kept in touch with probably about half a dozen Camino friends. And one thing that I've done over the years, obviously social media has made it a little bit easier to keep in touch with people. But every year, and I know some of my friends are here online listening, every year I send off a Christmas card. And this is my way to check in with everybody, to let them know how I'm doing and to let them know that I'm thinking about them. And right now I'm up to over 130 Christmas cards. I write them in English, Spanish, and French. And so I added some of my Camino friends to that list.
Oh, fabulous. Wonderful. It's a real treat to get them, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
So someone wants to know, how can you enjoy or go on the Camino de Santiago if you can't walk? Now, can you go by car, or do you have someone that you can actually go and will take you, or what?
Oh, absolutely. You can take a car, you can take a tour bus. You can take a horse, you can take a bike. So you don't necessarily have to walk at all. There are definitely a lot of options. I really wanted to do the horse, and I kept looking through the Camino, but then I started feeling guilty. I'm like, no, maybe I should just finish the Camino walking, but the horse would have been absolutely delightful. So there are tons of tourist agencies that cater to pilgrims that don't want to walk or aren't able to walk.
Okay, so is booking the hotels a problem? How did you do that? I mean,
that is not a problem. I use booking.com, although I'm not sure, because of COVID, I'm not sure what the best site would be these days, but booking.com 3 years ago was absolutely amazing. I did book as soon as my dad told me he wanted to go on the Camino, I went and booked all of the hotels. I got Brian Beerley's tour guide, which is like the Bible for the Camino de Santiago, and it listed all of the stages on the Camino. And I went on Booking and I booked all of the pensions and all of the hotels on the Camino. And I put in the filters. So I put 2 twin beds, breakfast included. I even put a bathtub because I wasn't sure how severe our injuries were going to be. So I really wanted to have a bathtub. And I also put television and Wi-Fi. And when I put all of those filters in, the variety of hotels isn't very much. I mean, there was maybe 1 or 2 pensions or hotels to choose from. So if you are going to book your hotels in advance, do so months in advance so that you make sure you have them. There is a drawback to it though. If you do book your hotels in advance, you have to remember, if you're injured or not, you still have to make it to your hotel that same day. So you don't have that leisure of, staying wherever you want. But if you don't make your reservations, you also run the risk of the albergues being full and you having to walk to the next one. So you kind of have to play with both of them a little bit.
You have to constantly figure out where you're going or adjust yourself, because
Exactly.
you were walking more than 15 miles a day.
Yes, in some cases, yes. And I think on the last day, I think we walked like a marathon. It was like 23 or 24 miles that we walked on the last day. And the reason we did that was because I needed to put the last 2 days together into one so that we could go all the way to Finisterre, which was once considered to be the end of the world. And that was 100 kilometers out. And we took a bus there, obviously. So we rushed to get to Santiago de Compostela. We got our Compostela certificate. We took a nice tour all the way to Finisterre, which we practically slept the whole way. So I don't remember much of it, but the views of the ocean were just spectacular. And you kind of get the sense of like, you understand why it's called the end of the world, because when you look at the ocean, it looks absolutely endless. It's an incredible sight to see.
So was your father one of the oldest walkers on?
No.
Oh, no.
No, he was not one of the oldest walkers. We found people in their 80s doing the Camino. We were definitely humbled by the people that we met on the Camino. They beat us hands down every step of the way. Absolutely.
So would some people maybe ride a bus or ride a horse, and then the next day they walk? Do you have to line that up in advance to go on your bus or your
Not
or take
necessarily.
a
You can
car?
no, you can definitely do it off the cuff. One of our friends, Drew, that we met in Logroño, he was having some pretty severe foot problems, and he was a young guy. I think he was like 23, 24 years old. And so we befriended him. We walked with him for quite a few miles. And then I would say maybe about 5 or 6 days later, I catch a glimpse of him racing by me on a bicycle, and I yell out his name. And I said, "What happened?" And he said, he had so many injuries on his feet that he just decided to go rent a bicycle. So he did the rest of the Camino on the bicycle, and then he decided to use the rest of his time to tour Europe.
So what was your most favorite city along the way?
I would say León was my favorite city. It's the kind of place that you want to live. It had everything you can possibly imagine. It's definitely going back in time. The architecture is spectacular. Everything is as it was maybe 400 or 500 years ago. It's absolutely beautiful. The streets are delightful. The cafes are gorgeous. The food is amazing. There's a lot to do in the city of León, even without the festivals. There's plenty to do there. There's museums. There's obviously cathedrals. There's a lot of culture there, music. There's plenty to keep you busy, even if you're not there for the festival.
So when you went to these different places to eat, did you need to have French money? Did you actually arrive with money, or did you change money, or did you pay with a credit card?
No, we took out money regularly. I would say maybe my dad and I took turns taking money out of the ATM. I think we were probably taking out maybe 200 euros every, I would say maybe 7 days or something like that, because we were only buying our lunch dinners and some snacks because all of the breakfasts were included in our hotels.
So were they expensive? How much was 200 euros at that
I
time?
was about maybe $235 more or less, but meals were an average of $10 to $15, extremely reasonable. You can get a Texas-sized steak for about $13 with all of the trimmings. The amount of food is just incredible. I made fun of my dad one day because I think we stopped there for lunch, and we had just passed some cows, and I ordered some eggs, and my dad ordered a steak. And I told my dad, I think they killed the cow outside because this thing was monstrous. And yes, he ate the whole thing. But the price was very reasonable.
I would imagine you would get very hungry.
Absolutely.
The way.
Absolutely. We ate the whole way. And just so you know, I walked 500 miles and I only lost 5 pounds. So don't think that you're good, because I ate so much. I was eating all the time. We were eating ice cream and all of the food and the meals. I mean, I need to do a whole other talk just on the food, because the food portions were just extraordinary. So yeah, I only lost 5 pounds. So don't think this is going to be your diet solution on the Camino. It's not going to happen.
Well, if anyone's ever gone to outside of Fresno and had one of those Basque restaurants at one of those meals, you start off and think, oh, well, this is it. And then it just keeps coming. So it is absolutely a lot of food. It's just absolutely spectacular.
It is. And there's a Basque restaurant now in Pasadena. There's a Basque restaurant in Pasadena that just opened. It's called Sasso. It's on El Molino next to the Playhouse.
Oh, well, then everybody needs to go try that after this. Get yourself ready before you go to your special Camino de Santiago experience. But this was a fabulous program. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, Susana. We all enjoyed it so much. Thank you very much. You talked about how this changed you. Did you feel that it's changed you going on the Camino de Santiago?
Absolutely, yes, because you go into this thing thinking that you're going to be enlightened somehow. And then I arrived in Santiago and nothing really happened. And I came home and I'm like, boy, I just walked 500 miles and nothing happened. And then one day out of the blue, I was kind of thinking about it. And it was kind of like the light bulb went off. And I'm like, wow, I wrote 39 poems on this Camino. Who does that? I mean, it was just like, it was almost like a miracle to me. If you were to ask me to write a poem today, I don't know if I could do it, but to write a poetry under so much distress on the Camino is really a miracle and a blessing. So it didn't hit me until way later, and it's really helped me a lot, obviously. And it's just been the gift that keeps on giving. And now that I was able to publish it and share it with the world, I think it's just been an absolutely wonderful experience. I didn't know I could, give so much to my friends, family, and everyone else in the community. And it's been such a blessing that I've been able to do that.
Well, you've given us a wonderful gift today to share your experience with all of us, and I thank you very much. So I know a lot of you will want to listen to this wonderful program again, so go to YouTube Pasadena Library. It'll be up tomorrow or the next day, and be sure and either go to Vroom and see if copies are available, or to Amazon. And the sonnets are absolutely beautiful, and it's a wonderful introduction by a Pasadena poet, Thelma Reyna. So thank you so much, Susana. We'll all give you a round of applause. Thank you very much.
My friend.
Beautiful, beautiful program.
Thank you so much. I see
Thank you all for
Diamond and Lena. Thank you
you
so much. You all are amazing. Alicia, thank you so much. I can't see anybody else, but thank you so much. I love you guys. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much for sharing this with us. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. You gave us a lovely gift. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.